Thanks, Liz. Okay. Yeah, so as Liz said, I'm Andrew Cain. I work in the area of computer science and software engineering, primarily teaching introduction to programming. So these are large first-year programming units, and that got me interested in improving learning outcomes. So I'll talk a bit about what I did for my citation. I'm sure, as we're aware, one of the goals for a university is to educate students. And as academics, we work with the students to help them develop understanding within a certain field. So for me, that's computer science, but of course that applies in other fields as well. One of the challenges that we have is that while we're thinking about understanding and educating people within the field, we have a number of students, or may I say many students, who are not naturally inclined to focus on developing understanding. Instead, they focus on things like marks and assessment. So what do I need to do to pass? And their goal is primarily targeted at the assessment rather than focusing on the understanding. And what we want to do ideally is have students that are focusing on developing appropriate, good understanding of whatever the topic might be, so that they can go on either to further studies or to professional life. So what I was looking at doing then was using assessment to change the dynamics of the teaching and learning environment within the introductory programming unit to try to get more focus on developing understanding. I didn't reinvent the wheel. So what I did was we had a look back, and the ideas of constructive alignment seemed to apply quite nicely as a way of getting students to engage with understanding rather than to focus purely on passing. Yeah. And the way I've done this is from the work of John Biggs, using what he originally proposed in constructive alignment was the use of portfolio assessment to try and refocus students. And so the way that we've done this is really to use the portfolio assessment to change how assessment works throughout the whole unit, and so that ourselves and the students can be more aligned. We can hopefully align the assessment to match up more with developing understanding rather than just tasks that need to be completed. Okay, so how do we do this? We're originally focusing the unit around the unit's intended learning outcomes, but then we changed the way that we deliver the unit in order to get students to build understanding over the course of the teaching period, and then we look at assessing their work at the end. Okay, so for this approach, which we've been using in Introduction to Programming, we focus the entire unit around the unit intended learning outcomes, and that sort of becomes the guiding document for everything else within the unit. So these intended learning outcomes need to be expressed clearly so that they can be used by everybody within the system, so the teaching staff as well as the students. The nature of the portfolio assessment changes the importance of the intended learning outcomes. So the first few times we did this, we spent a lot of time going back over the intended learning outcomes, making sure that they were clear so that the students and the staff had a more similar understanding of what these things meant. So removing things like jargon as much as possible. Obviously there needs to be appropriate jargon in there, but making it so that it's clear and understood by the students. I think the relevance of this can be summarised in a way I often explain this to the students in the subjects. So I tell them when they start the subject that the assessment for this subject will be the longest exam that they have ever done. Yeah? And the exam has, I think for my subject there's 5 learning outcomes, and so I said there are 5 questions on the exam. You've got 15 weeks to demonstrate that you can do these 5 things. Yeah? And so that I think helps drive the point that, well, if I've got 15 weeks to demonstrate 5 things, I'm not after some 1-paragraph summary of what that thing means. I'm after something much deeper and more meaningful. And also brings back the point of these outcomes being really that sort of central point that everything is being built around. So once we have the intended learning outcomes, the rest of the subject really is the students demonstrating that they have achieved those outcomes. What we found though is that that wasn't enough, and what we added to that was then assessment criteria to demonstrate, or for the students to indicate how they can demonstrate those outcomes to different grade levels. And so these is done at a sort of a holistic criterion referenced level. So we would specify criteria. If you're aiming for a pass grade, then this is what the portfolio must demonstrate. If you're after a credit, then we would expect it does everything that pass does, but it also does these other things. If you're distinction, then it does more, and high distinction further. Yeah. And so this then helps guide the level to which we expect students to achieve the different learning outcomes. So we have the outcomes, this is what we want you to achieve, as well as sort of standards that indicate how you can achieve those to different levels. The idea being then everything from this point on for the students is about meeting those criteria, which I've tried as much as possible to tie back to what I want. Yeah, I want you to demonstrate these outcomes, and this is how I want you to demonstrate them. So it's actually, conceptually, it's quite simple, though there ends up being quite a number of parts that go in to get this actually working together. Once we've done that, oh, looks like there's a bit of a font issue there, doesn't matter. Once we've done that, the next part in order of setting up the unit would be to create a number of tasks that students can undertake in order to demonstrate those outcomes. So we map down the different outcomes, the criteria, design tasks to help students meet those criteria to different levels. And so within the one unit, students can, we've got software that helps support this. The students can indicate what grade it is that they are aiming to achieve, because not all of our students need to aim to achieve high distinction, and we don't want to, if a student is struggling and is aiming for a pass or a credit, I don't want to confuse them by having them look at the requirements for distinction and high distinction. Similarly, if a student is going for credit and they are doing really well, we'll obviously try to bump them up to look at those higher ones, but they don't have to. So students can set their own target, and then they get tasks related to that target. And the semester then, so that's the start of the semester. The semester then becomes us really working with the students to help the students achieve those outcomes. So it changes the whole assessment dynamic. Now we can give critical feedback, and it's positive instead of negative. So we're not taking away marks from anything. None of the tasks have marks associated with them. The entire grade is determined by the portfolio at the end. So during the semester, it's all about helping them do better in their portfolio. So you show me something, I can then tell you honestly what I think of it. I can get the students to fix different aspects of it and build their understanding as they go. And the great thing is the students don't complain when you tell them what they've done wrong. I have had students complain that I haven't told them enough. It's like, surely there was something you could make me fix in this, which is a totally different thing I had never experienced before. We do this with frequent feedback, so frequent formative feedback. These tasks are done at a weekly level, so I don't have separate assignments, exam. There are just the outcomes, the portfolio, and some tasks that students complete in order to produce things to go into their portfolio. These tasks are done weekly, so for example, in Introduction to Programming, we're in week 2. There were 3 tasks students had to do last week. There's another 3 tasks they do this week. And later, I think the units tend to be very bound to the start. So there's a lot at the start and less as we go on where things take a bit longer. But these first ones were quite small. Most of the students have got those done, and then working on the next lot of tasks to progress through the unit. So these are small tasks. Means the students can do them reasonable small amount of time. They get them in, we can look at them and give them quick feedback. So it has to be all very rapid so that we can iterate or develop their understanding iteratively, build on what they've already understood. So that's the central concept is frequent formative feedback cycles. So students submit work. In part of delivering the unit, we provide content for the students to access. We give them support material. That's what I mean by deliver the unit. The students hopefully use that to help themselves construct appropriate knowledge. In doing that, they'll produce evidence of what they've been able to achieve. They provide that to us. We can give them feedback which feeds back into them understanding. Also can feed into us changing how we're doing things. If work is done, when it is submitted, if it's not done to an appropriate standard, we do ask them to resubmit the work. So it isn't complete until it's done to an appropriate level. So all the way through the semester, everything is formative. You show me stuff, I tell you what I think of it, I give you what I think is the most beneficial help so that you as an individual student can progress appropriately through the unit. So different students will get different feedback depending on where they're up to, etc. The great thing then is at the end of the semester, what would appear to be a large load for assessing portfolios is actually very, very simple. Because of all of the work that we've been through, these formative feedback cycles means that I've already looked at everything every student of mine anyway will be submitting in their portfolio. And I've already said what I think of it. And I've noted that down somewhere else in a computer system to keep track of that for me so I don't have to remember. And so what students do then, they don't have to actually do any extra work at the end of the semester. They collate together the evidence that they've produced from their tasks that they've done. They do an alignment for me, so they tell me what they think they learnt from each of the tasks and how the tasks relate to what they're supposed to have learnt. They tell me what grade I should give them, because that helps me a lot. The way I get them, they write what I call a learning summary report for the start of their portfolio, and in that I tell them it's like a cover letter for a job. You are applying for a grade, so tell me why I should give you a high distinction. And if you can evidence against the criteria and you've got the things that support it, then that's what you get. So I get very few queries about why I got certain marks, because most of my students mark for me. My job then, when I'm assessing the portfolios, is obviously to evaluate what they submit. I'm able to review the learning summary report that they put in, where they tell me what they've learnt, they tell me how it meets the criteria. I can check against my list of things I know that they've done and verify for myself that it is what I expect it to be. And the process tends to work very quickly. So we're able to assess, for this unit we have this semester 500 students. I've had 600 students doing this subject, and we assess all of their portfolios in less time than it would take to mark in a traditional exam, and it's much more enjoyable. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier, for the distinction and high distinction criteria, we ask students to go beyond the scope of the unit, basically. So passing credit would be, pass is mostly scaffolded tasks that the students complete, and through completing those tasks develop appropriate understanding. I then ask credit to be less doing and more demonstrating that you understand how to do. So things like concept maps, like that, to try to explain your understanding more than creating more programs. And the distinction, I get them to apply what they've understood in their own context. So they can build, it's programming, so they build for me a program that they want to build. And I don't really mind what it is, build me anything you want to build that demonstrates the learning outcomes. High distinction then, I used to ask them to do a research project, so a small research report. But then I realized that universities are two things, research and teaching. So I've changed it now to either build me some teaching resources that I can use next semester that demonstrates you have an excellent high distinction understanding, or do a research report, or produce fantastic technical work in order to get the high distinction. So that just gives you a bit of an idea about what the different grades, or how I differentiate between the different grades. So assessing it is super quick. Yeah, I know within a few seconds whether they're pass credit, distinction, or high distinction. We then have some small margins for a really average credit, the sort of middle credit, or a good credit. And those differences are very small. Okay. Yeah, so the assessment is holistic. We look at the work the students have submitted in their portfolio. So they document that all in their learning summary report. My assessment then, I use this table, matrix, in order to work out the results. The basic process is 1, determine the grade. Very simple, because each of them is very clear. I try to make the distinctions between the grades as clear as possible, so there's no confusion for me and no confusion for the students whether they're this grade or that grade. So that's very quick. And then within that, I would start originally assuming that they are going to receive the average grade in that category. And then if the reflections and their justifications for why they should get their grade, or the work is poor, that would push them down. If it's neither poor nor fantastic, it stays in the middle. And if it's really good, then it goes up to the higher mark. We usually do this marking in pairs. So two staff, a tutor and myself, for example, would look at each one. so that we get some sort of consistency across the marking. Though we tend to find that we would only ever be out by sort of one. I've never had a case where I think it's a distinction and somebody else thinks it's a credit, for example. It would only ever be that I think it's middle and they think it's higher, and we would then discuss why and collaboratively work out which grade it is. And so the overall process that we proposed is based on that. The idea that you construct the criteria at the start, develop teaching and learning activities as staff. Delivery is really all about the student and much less about the staff, so they are driving this process. We are then just acting as guides, really. So you're working with the students throughout the whole semester to try to help them achieve the best result that they can possibly achieve. At the end of the semester, they submit their work as a portfolio, and you can assess that quite quickly because it's resulting from this work that you've already looked at. Okay. So has constructive alignment helped us refocus learning? Our challenge was that many students focus on the assessment and not on what we want, is the understanding. The idea of using constructive alignment with portfolio assessment is to try as much as possible to focus the assessment on what we want. So the assessment and the understanding are much more closely aligned. It's still not perfect because students can still do things without trying to understand, but those that actively want to learn can really progress very well through this system. And those that don't usually eventually either decide to try or do something else. So we've been using this now, I think, for 7 years. So I've had assessed over 2,500 portfolios using the approach. My general feelings are it's changed completely my perception of education. I was very much a 2 assignments exam type thing. We're assessing the content. It's changed much more to being, it was always interesting. I would deliver fantastic classes and then be amazed that I didn't get fantastic results on the exam. And it's like, how did this happen? How did the students not understand all of these great things that I told them? One of the challenges with the portfolio stuff is now I know what the students don't know much more. Because we have these frequent formative feedback cycles, I'm aware of where the students are up to more frequently. So throughout the whole semester, I know when things are going not as well as I had hoped, which seems interesting. It's usually around week 6, just to let you know. And then week 9, they catch up to where they should be, which I think is also really interesting. There's some sort of cycle goes there. Anyway, that was all I had. Thank you.
First, just our team would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather, the people of the Kulin Nations, and of course we pay our respects to their elders, past and present. So I'm just going to briefly introduce what we do at ACU. The history program, it's part of the Bachelor of Arts degree, but one of the challenges is that not all of our students are doing a straight Bachelor of Arts. We have students doing a Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Teaching, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Laws. Youth work students take our unit, social science students, students doing straight education. So one of the things that we found over the last few years is that our students coming in at the very beginning are coming from very different skill levels. Some who studied history quite recently, some who haven't studied it for years. And so through sort of talking collaboratively, especially since around about 2009, 2010, we realized that it made more sense, instead of treating each unit that we taught as an individual unit that we ourselves or a sessional staff member was teaching, it made more sense to come together and try and consider the history degree or the history major as a program where we would scaffold the assessments and the learning outcomes across the 3 years from first year through to third year. And so doing this together, the three of us, we tried to come up with a new program where students were always doing something different in their history units, and where we really wanted to engage them into active research, to transform them into active researchers by the end of third year, who were what we like to say doing history, or going out and living history. And we came up with this together through several years, and in 2014, because ACU is a national university, we've got our campuses, we essentially took it national, is the sort of nice way to put that. So what we're going to do is each of us is going to go through some of the, or more likely one of the assessments we do at each of the 3 year levels to give you a sense of how we've tried to break the assessment down into teaching particular skills at each of the 3-year levels. So Ellen's going to talk first about first year.
Thanks, Noah. One of the things that we really wanted to get students to think about in first year is that history is a conversation or a debate rather than a set of facts that they needed to learn by the end of the semester. And it's all very well to get up in front of a class and say that to students, but they don't necessarily believe you that they can participate in that conversation or debate at such an early stage. And so one of the things that we do in our early modern European history unit is to actually talk to students about coming up with an argument. And often first year students express discomfort at this or anxiety. They might give it a go in their first assessment task and then get some feedback that it's not quite there. And they would say things to us like, I really find it hard to construct an argument because I don't develop a viewpoint or a position. I can't find my position there. Or it can be really hard to know how to condense all my thoughts on a topic. Or my lecturers tell me I just end up telling a story. I'm not creating an argument. And so we thought about this and decided that really one of the good things that they could do was to participate in a debate. And debating is something that we all do as academics. But in order to do a really good debate, you have to be able to, first of all, find a position, research evidence that's going to support your position. You have to be able to articulate that position and defend it when the other side starts to counter it. And we also get the students to try and guess what the other side might say. So the first thing we do is get them to do a split class debate, and we do it on the witch hunt phenomenon, which is something that historians themselves don't agree about. There are many, many theories as to why so many people were put on trial for witchcraft, but historians haven't come to a consensus about this. And so they actually do this in class and look at 2 specific arguments and research around that and present that. And then following that, they all individually go off and choose yet another theory about the witch hunts and follow that up, so that when they bring all these ideas back into class, there's really quite a diverse range of theories being presented, yet each student has individually researched one of them. And this has had really quite a lot. It's seen as fun by the students, but they can also then transfer those skills. And we asked them actually to tell us what they had learnt by doing this by writing a letter to the next cohort of students, explaining to them what sort of skills they would need to debate successfully and also how they could transfer these things to their writing. So most of them did pick up on the idea that they had to identify, construct and defend an argument, that they needed to research, that they needed to think about the arguments of the opposition. And also that where they may be weak in their argument would be where the opposition would come in and criticise them. And so this is what one student wrote in their letter to the next cohort. They said, all these skills can be applied to essay writing. In fact, when crafting an essay, it can be helpful to think of your tutor or essay marker as the opposition in a debate. For example, you can think about what the opposition, your tutor, might use against your arguments, and then you can look at how you can incorporate that into your essay and make it resistant. So again, it's that idea of being able to improve before the end result. And the students really take this aboard. So by the end of first year, they have actually entered into that historical conversation and participated in it and actually experienced it, but also should feel more confident about being able to research and write their essays and so forth. And then in second year, we really want them to understand and the sorts of practical skills that historians might use in the field. And so we move from just getting students to think about history as a debate and entering the conversation into actually hands-on doing. And so one of the things that we do in second year Australian Women's History is a Trove assignment. And Trove is a massive digitised newspaper database. It's got more than that, but that's what we get them to do. And so we give the students a number of research challenges throughout the semester. We set the challenge and they have to go into the digitised databases, look at the old newspapers and find the answers. So there is no set answer. They have to research it and provide the best answer they can to that challenge. So they, once again, experience the sense of research, but also the sense that there can be many answers and approaches to a topic. So I'm going to ask Noah to talk more about what we do in second year now.
So thanks, Ellen. So one thing I should say is we don't completely get rid of the research essay. The research essay is very much a staple in the humanities, including in history. But these are other ways of us trying to approach the research essay. And for instance, another task that Ellen teaches Australian women's history, so I feel bad speaking about it because it's her task. But another task in addition to the Trove exercise is to have the students go out and do an oral history interview with an Australian woman. And part of the process in the lessons in teaching for that assessment is also teaching them about ethics, research ethics, and ethics approval, something that we as researchers who do oral history interviews have to go through. Sometimes it's a very painful ethics application process. But so it's still a research essay, but it's using a very specific tool of history. In some of our units, we have them write an academic scholarly book review, or we send them to particular specialist databases, the sorts of databases that we might use in our research, and also specific primary source databases. And that's actually an example I'm going to give from my class, US Foreign Policy since 1945. For their major assessment, what I make them do is use a series of primary source documents that are all these declassified government documents, memos from the State Department, presidential documents. And what the US State Department for years has been doing is compiling them into these volumes called Foreign Relations of the United States. As you can see from the hard copies, they're quite thick. And one of the beautiful things about the 21st century is they've now all been digitized as well. And so each student in my class is assigned a different volume. The first time I did this task, it was assigned at random. They pulled it out of a hat. That didn't work as well because some students got volumes that didn't mesh with their interests. So now I let them choose their own volume. There's, I don't have the list here, but they're organized, as you can see, by administration and by theme. So one might be called Vietnam 1961 or Africa 1962. And inside each of these volumes are all of these different primary source documents. These are all first-hand documents from the history. And what we ask the students to do is to come up with an essay topic based on the documents in their volume, and then to come up with a research essay. So they're not relying just on this. They also have to go out and use secondary sources. They also have to go out and use other primary sources. I run a tutorial where I go through this, but also give them tips about other places they can go for primary sources, like presidential libraries online, the State Department reading room, the CIA reading room. And these are all the exact same tools that other academic historians of diplomatic US history are using. And we're teaching our students to do this. And the reason we do this, and this is just one example, is we find they get very excited at the idea of doing the same hands-on history that academic historians are doing. We've had similar responses to the Trove exercise, where they're going in and looking at these old newspapers, and sometimes they might be the first person to find this particular historical record. And so this is why we're trying to teach them these very active hands-on skills in second year, building on those ideas about how to do an argument in first year. How we do this will vary from class to class, though. This is just one example. And then, of course, we take that through to third year, where I'm going to hand it over to Nell.
Thank you. So by third year, what we'd really like students to do is take ownership of a whole project and be able to do that in a much more independent way as well. So this is building on the whole set of skills that they've developed up to that point. I'm going to talk about an example in a third year subject that I taught, which was called History of Western Childhood. Like many of our third year units, it's quite a thematic and conceptual unit, which again is stretching their level of critical engagement and thinking to that extra sort of level compared to what they've been asked to do in second year, where the units are often more focused around a particular time and a particular place. So this subject basically was structured around a scaffolded semester-long project. There were roughly 20 digital archives that I found that were accessible and that related to the history of childhood in the West in some way. The first step was for students to experiment and explore. So it was, at this stage, a really wide open assignment. Obviously, part of my role is to identify when particular students needed a little bit more guidance. But for those who were ready to just swim and enjoy the experience of being a historian in the archives, it was an opportunity to just go wherever they wanted to, and really so many of them did. The next step was that they had to develop a project proposal. So this is the first sort of assessed stage of the project. And it was a chance for me to formally say, yes, I can understand how you're going to do that research and that you're going to be able to find some secondary sources or, literature to support that project. Because again, it's driven by the primary sources, but history isn't just about the primary sources, or scholarly history isn't. It's about being able to use those secondary sources as well. Then about 2 weeks before the essay was due, in class, students had to stand up and orally deliver a summary of the project to date, which said, this is what my question is, this is how I'm using my archive, these are the 2 most important secondary sources I've found so far, and this is what I think my argument will be. Now, if you can actually do all of those things, you are well on the way to writing a really successful essay, because you've thought out a lot of the really important things and you're not doing it the night before you're about to hand it in. And then it comes in as a formal essay late in the semester. So just to give you an idea of the ways in which this was a really new challenge for students. Some of the archives might look something like this. This was in fact one of the archives that I pointed students to. And they can't type in how many children were convicted in the 1800s. They can't type in a question like they could in Google, or even keywords like they could in the library catalogue. So we're actually, in the process of sending them out to independently explore, actually facilitating them learning a whole new set of search skills, much more like the ones that historians need to use in archives, because archives are a really different beast. You can't search them always the way that you can, many other sort of library collections and things like that. It was really quickly clear that students didn't immediately understand the potential of their archives. So there were all kinds of different ways that you could use this Old Bailey. You could find one or two really rich cases and use those as the inspiration. Or you could look at a whole range of cases and do some number crunching. And one of the ways that I helped students to get their head around that kind of methodological possibility was through the tutorials in the unit. And each week in the tutorials, we workshopped a different primary source and a different methodological approach to using it. So we looked at quantitative versus qualitative engagement with sources. We looked at the necessary different ways in which you work with oral history versus historical newspapers, and that was a really important part of giving students skills that they could apply when they went to their archive. The fact that it was a scaffolded task was essential as well, because as much as the generic, well not generic, but the general skills delivered to the whole class were clearly important, students also needed that specific feedback, and the fact that they got it a couple of points in the project without it being a lot of work for the people marking it was really important. And the other thing that I think made a project like this possible and successful in the way that it was that this was in my area of research. if this wasn't my area of research, I don't think I could have found 20 digital archives that I knew well enough that I could guide 60 undergraduate students to do their work. So I really think that this is an example of, of course we all sometimes have to teach outside of our exact area, but I think it's an example of how rich an experience it can be from the students, particularly in terms of authentic assessment, if we're bringing them to our world and not only our expertise but our enthusiasm about it as well. So the student comments pleasantly surprised me in how much they actually picked up on the alignment between the tutorials, the lectures and the assignment that was the core of the class. So a number commented on the tutorials and that they really did help them in their essay experience. They appreciated having a semester-long project. They did get that sense of ownership and a rich learning experience out of the opportunity. And just as a final sort of amazing thing that came out of the project was that students actually did unexpected things. Like they went, because of the freedom that they had, they went beyond the kind of tasks that we would probably have been likely to set them. So one student who had studied mathematics as part of her degree as well as history actually put those two skills together and did a really exciting quantitative study of the Old Bailey records actually, and had graphs and statistics, and it was just really unexpected, and I'd never seen anything like that in an undergraduate essay before, and it was just wonderful to see actually how innovative students can be when we give them a structured but free space to work in. So just to summarise, what's our goal across the 3 years? It is about taking real history to the world. When students walk out of the third year of their history major, we hope that they understand that history isn't just about having a question and going to the library to see what books say about it. History is actually about looking at things from the sources up, and that they then have the tools to be masters of their own history and to engage with primary sources and secondary sources and to have a voice. The types of assessments that we do, we have to say, not only did we not do them when we were undergraduates, they weren't possible in the same way. You're probably picking up that a lot of this stuff relies on the digital world and the amazing amount of fantastic work that's been done in a lot of different countries to get fantastic digital sources online and searchable. And what we hope that by taking advantage of all of that, when our students finish their third year, they are creative, confident and innovative researchers. And in the BA, we're constantly asked, so how does your BA make people job ready? Well, we think in history it really does. First of all, if they want to go on and study more history, they are really well equipped. If they want to go teach, they have got hands-on history to take into the classroom. And if they want to go do other things, for instance, a number of students go into government jobs or research roles in organisations, they're really independent, innovative thinking researchers. So we hope they leave with a passion for history, but we really believe that those skills go well beyond that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. I won't bother using the slides, I think, because of the time we've got. I'll just give you a few highlights of the work that I've been engaged in just over the last 18 months with 3,700 people around the world, looking at have we actually got the learning outcomes for the graduates from our universities for the last 50 years or for the next 50 years. And I'll just give you a quick rundown of that. But these slides that you can see here, I've sent down and they're available to all of you, and in fact I'm able to pad it out for full day workshops, so you can see why I've got to really give you the 20 minutes Reader's Digest version here today. So I'm just going to pile straight in. So the way in which I've run this leadership, is the Office for Learning and Teaching Senior Fellowship, is actually something that I've discovered as a practitioner and as a leader aligns very much with successful early career graduates. and with the way in which organisations themselves choose to run. The way I've done this and the way I disported myself as a leader is always listen first with a menu, with a case for change and a menu that is made up of what other people have already found sort of works, so it's got a reality test in it. But listen genuinely to see if anyone's interested. Because if they're not interested, they're not going to engage. I know it's a spooky concept. Then, having done that, you link together what most people find efficacious and feasible and sensible. Then you leverage that into something that brings together, in a way, what everyone is doing. And then you lead. So you listen, link, leverage and lead, always in that order. And it's a little thing that I've found takes a lot of stress off yourself. So I've got rid of the word dissemination and I've replaced it with the word engagement. So the way in which I've done the senior fellowship, and I'm old and clapped out, I actually taught the very first HSC history class, which I can tell you guys later how we did it. It was collaborative learning in a very interesting way. So, you know, that was 1967, so I've been around for too long really, and nothing's new, only that which is forgotten, right? And in a sense, what I'm about to say now is getting forgotten. I think universities are losing their way. I think they're becoming far too vocational, work ready. What we've really got to be doing is looking for graduates who are work ready plus for the future. Not just work ready for today. People want to get a job, they want the skills and knowledge, but it's the plus that I'm interested in. And what is the plus? Well, here's what my 3,700 mates in my listen, link and leverage moments, you'll notice that I don't have my own ideas, I just go out and pinch them. It's called benchmarking. Here's what they've said. Here are 4 dimensions of the plus that we should be thinking about when we're trying to actually formulate our program level outcomes in a more nuanced fashion. The first is every graduate should be sustainability literate, socially, culturally, economically, environmentally, in their discipline or professional area. Number 1. And the reason we say that is because we've just issued that. I work for the United Nations, Uni, on the Decade for Education for Sustainable Development. And if it ain't coming out of our universities, where are these solutions going to come from? They will not spontaneously erupt. So that's number 1. Number 2 is they should be change implementation savvy. What that means is they should be able to manage mad people on Monday when they get out there, because they're going to have to face it. Number 2. Number 3, they should be inventive and creative. They should, every single person morally should be given the chance to see if they are capable of actually creating. Not just a small elite. Not just those doing honours. Because every one of us has the capacity to invent solutions, social, cultural, economic, environmental, not just financial, not just technical. So let's build it into our intended program level outcomes. And the final one, which is a little bit of a, as an historian, a slight return to the University of Bologna 1127 when it got going. The University of Bologna's intent was to have people to in fact reflect on the tacit assumptions they bring with them, and this relates directly to what you're saying about history. Basically, people are taking for granted 4 major themes that are driving the 21st century agenda, and why would it not be useful for the Donald Trumps of this world when they go to university to have had to think very carefully about their articulated position on those assumptions? The first is growth is always good for everyone. The second is consumption's happiness. When in doubt, buy an iPhone 5 million and throw the others, obviously waste making, onto a pile in the cupboard, right? Consumption's, so growth is always good, consumption's happiness, ICT is always the answer, information technology. When in doubt, go onto Twitter, the online bar, right? I was telling the guys this morning, to me, I've realised what Twitter is now. It's sort of like the online bar meets Midsummer Murders. Right? Oh, I know. Oh, did you hear? Oh, right? Yeah, there's not a lot of veracity in the intellect that's required in saying, look, and Facebook, of course, is just an exercise in narcissism. You know, look at me, look at me. It's not really me at all, but look at me. So ICT is not always the answer. And the final one is globalization's great. So I wanted to raise that because it relates very much to E.H. Carr's wonderful book in 1963, which is What is History?, where he basically spent the entire book saying that history is the tacit assumptions people bring as an historian to select from the primary sources, the ones that suit their argument. Why would not every graduate, because 95% of the world's politicians have a degree, Why will we not, on a moral basis, be actually trying to get these people to come to grips and articulate their position on those tacit assumptions? Not saying, you know, I'm an old lefty, so you can see my position, but I just want people to have thought about it and to be able to articulate it and to know what they're doing tacitly as a graduate. This is very different from just simply being work ready, because all work ready is you've got to know the skills and knowledge and you regurgitate them under controlled conditions and you're going to be a great human being, global citizen and effective practitioner. No. So that, I'll just give you a couple of other things. I'm going to finish early. You can read the slides and see the rest. It's sort of, you know, this is like a trailer really, isn't it? You know. But I just think we're losing our way if we don't come to grips with that. So what have I been doing with my mates? Well, we're producing the Uncle Jeffy Flip the Curriculum on its Head guide by starting with the program level outcomes, not the unit level ones. Not like some baronial thing where I did my doctorate on this, so it's got to go in, even if it doesn't relate to anyone. Right? Not that that happens in Australia. To actually have the program teams themselves explicitly reflect on how did we come up with these program level outcomes, in the same way that I've just said about the tacit assumptions. Because if you go back, and I've just done it all around the world, I've just been at Harvard, MIT, University of Toronto, Charles Uni in Prague, looking at how they came up with it, and they go, oh, well, we sort of just, well, we had to fill the template out, and we thought critical thinking, well, yeah, we'll put that in, and team player, right? It's a bit like when people go to employers and ask them what they want in a graduate. They can't make the tacit explicit either, so they say what they read in the paper. Team player, they can't read and write, they've got to learn to read and write more. I want someone who fits in, but at the same time makes me, you know, like that doesn't help us really. It's not very sophisticated is all I'm saying. So it is no good for us to actually say we've flipped the curriculum on its head and say that we're mapping thoroughly to units and scaffolding and we're assessing really rigorously and fit for purpose and we've got no cheating at all, there's no essay factories, we've got it all covered, right? If all of that thorough assessment is of rubbish, but so well done. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So let us get, and this Flip the Curriculum on its Head guide is the 3700 have come up with cunning ways on how you could validate the program level outcomes. And the other one that's undercooked is cunning ways to do program level assessment, of which the portfolio one is an example, of which, you know, the staging and it all fits together somehow or other example is another. And we've got 240, that's why I've just been overseas for 6 weeks. I've been getting in cunning program level ways of doing authentic assessment. So for me, authentic assessment is about the capabilities that count, and that's not just the skill and knowledge, that's something more. It's about the personal capabilities people need to manage themselves when things go wrong, the interpersonal capabilities of being able to listen to mad people, not just to your friends, the cognitive capabilities of being able to diagnose what's going on in wicked moments, because that's when we all get tested. You know that when you leave here today, right, you know what happens. Mr. Cockup's highly likely to visit at some stage, right? Either at home or at work. And how you manage yourself then is your capability. You can have all the skill and knowledge in the world, but you're only as good as how you handle yourself when something goes wrong or an unexpected opportunity comes up. So that whole issue of powerful assessment is itself a driver. Now, I know students say we don't come to look at the assessment. They do. Most students want to know, how am I being assessed? What's going on here? What are the grades here? What are you going to do, mate? You know, how do I get my distinction? Whatever my aim is here, right? Rather than come along and just self-actualise. So there is two undercooked bits. The first is how do we validate program level outcomes? Whose voice? Many different voices could be listened to, not just us. How do we accommodate those into a program level outcome framework? You know, what personal capabilities are we looking for? What interpersonal? What cognitive? What skills and knowledge generic and what skills and knowledge IT based or whatever, or history based do we need? Who told us this? Did we just make it up? How do we know that's relevant and feasible? Knowing that what we're trying to do is produce work ready plus graduates, not just skill and knowledge ones, which in a sense is just saying what you guys were saying. So we've got 240 examples of the undercooked program level assessment. I'm going to give you a couple of examples now and then get out of your way, right? But we've got, my message to you today is the listen, link, leverage and lead. We need to get much better in our practice when we're trying to formulate program level outcomes to listen, link, leverage and lead with a proper framework. And we've got to get much better at helping one another learn from one another when we do the listen, link and leverage, we've got to have a way of accessing it. And this do-it-yourself kit we've produced, the 3,700 have done it, we've co-created it, is actually going to be available around about June, July. And it's going to be around the 6 keys to flipping the curriculum. Right program level outcomes first, right mapping, right assessment, right grading, right calibration of the graders, and finally, only at the very end, not at the start, right learning methods and resources to help people to do as well as they could on the assessment in the units that we know will build up to program level outcomes that count. Is that clear? And we're calling it Flip Correct, which is a bit of a vomit title, but anyway, as my secretary says to me, you can only do your best, Geoff, but it's not very good. But anyway, so you know, I'm over it now. I'm 70 and had it. So I wanted to suggest to you then that flipping the curriculum is the idea, but getting much more better at the program level outcomes and the assessment. And I think that really is why I accepted Liz's invitation to come down here today, because the authentic assessment issue, and I put it in the slides if you're interested in this. You know, what is authentic assessment? I'll give you just one example, right? This is one that we're doing over in the United States now in medicine. So this is scalable. And the ePortfolio ones is very popular. Capstones is popular, but this one's a little bit, picks up on the Work Ready Plus bit quite nicely. So there's 150 fledgling general practitioners sitting in an exam at the end, and they're in a subject called Dilemmas of Professional Practice as a Doctor. You see, we don't have it yet. We should. Right? And they've had killer moments that actual early career doctors have come up with when they got really thrown, and that's been a bit like you're staging up an formative assessment. You know, they've had a go at them and said what they do and compared it to the doctor. In the exam, what they then do is on the screen is a young mum, 28, with 2 kids in a doctor's surgery. She's sitting there talking on the mobile, you know, the iPhone 6S obviously, saying, you know, so I'm up with you young people. Saying, you know, darling, look, I'm home at 3. I've got the kids are hugging her, you know, it's all pretty soapy. I'll be home at 3, but I'm just picking up the mammography results now. They then cut, right, this is 150 scalable. They cut immediately then to each of these fledgling doctors are sitting there, and on the screen is her bloods and her mammography results. So the first step is skill and knowledge. They've got to actually work out what it's saying, you know what I mean? Like, you need that. I mean, I kind of like a doctor who could do that, right? And if you can read, and then you've got to send off to the server, right? You immediately, it disappears what your diagnosis is, right? That just goes. See, it's all electronically doable now. Then they say, now, okay, you've sent that off. Now have a look at, she's walking through the door. How are you going to break the news? Type it out. She's walking through the door right now. What are you going to say to her? Right? So you just have to do it. Do you see it's picking up personal, interpersonal, cognitive, being able to manage yourself, which is what we want also in a doctor, don't we? Right? That then goes off to the server. Then they say, now look at what the doctor actually did. And you look at the doctor did, then they say, now here's your task, right? This takes 20 minutes. You now have to write an essay, which is remarkable, right? On comparing your diagnosis with the actual path results. How accurate or not, how did you know, right? So that's one little one. How you broke the news to the woman compared to how the doctor did against the top 12 capabilities identified by successful early career doctors. And we've done this in 9 professions. So there's some slides in there if you want to have a squiz at a proper capability framework that really picks up on the personal ones, like being able to manage yourself when things go wrong, you know, not having your ego right in the front of the room, being willing to face and learn from errors. The interpersonal ones, like being able to read other human beings, to understand diversity, to put yourself in the shoes of others, etc. Cognitive, being able to diagnose, not problem solve. Problem solve's not the, like, problem solve with correct solutions is more a skill. You know what I mean? I mean, I did maths as well as history at uni, so I was quite good at memorising how to look like I was intelligent in maths by memorising the formulas and so on. So that's an example. That is an example of dilemma-based assessment that is scalable, that is learnable and practicable if you had a unit of study called Dilemmas of Professional Practice. Why would we not do it in any area? Like the classic moments for an archivist. I don't know what it would be, but you never know, you know? Because, thanks, for us in real life, when we get out there, we actually have to manage ourselves in those wicked moments, not just in those moments when it all runs tickety-boo and smoothly. So I could go on, but that I think is basically my time. I hope that's given you a feel for what we've come up with in terms of where I think higher education might need to do a little bit of tweaking, and we've done a do-it-yourself kit on it if you're interested. Thank you.